Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is all about the pensions assessment in Sage 50 payroll. My name is Sarah, and I'll be hosting and presenting the session today. And I am joined in the background by my colleagues Duncan and Alice, who are ready and waiting to answer your questions. And remember, today is part of our Pensions Discovery 2026 badge series. So if you attend at least 5 sessions plus the quiz, you will earn your very own digital badge. But we will talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the session. Let's take a look at what we'll be covering today. So we'll start with a quick recap of your pension duties and what the pension assessment actually is and when you need to run it. Next, we'll look at the practical side, so how to run the assessment, how to navigate the results, and how to spot any changes from one pay period to the next. Then we'll look at how to handle postponement, employee opt-ins, opt-out requests when these apply, and how to process them correctly within the pension assessment. And finally, we'll take a quick look at sending pension correspondence to your employees. So we'll look at the options available for sending that correspondence and marking them as sent within the pensions module as well. So that is what we have in store today for you. Let's get going. So let's start off with a bit of a recap and introduction. So I want to start with a quick look at your responsibilities as an employer when it does come to workplace pensions. So every employer has certain duties that they need to carry out. And at the heart of this are the 4 key auto-enrolment duties. So first up is choosing a pension scheme. So you as an employer will need to select a pension scheme and set it up with your chosen provider. And that's going to be the foundation of your compliance. Next, you'll work out who needs to be put into the pension scheme. So actually assessing your employees. So checking who is actually eligible for automatic enrolment. And that's where the pensions module and the pension assessment comes into play. You've got writing to your staff. So you must write to your employees to explain how auto-enrolment is going to apply to them specifically. And that's what we call sending pension correspondence. We will take a quick look at that later on in the webinar. And then finally, you'll need to confirm to the pensions regulator that your workplace pension is compliant and that all the information that you've provided is accurate. But as always, we have included a link just to the pensions regulator website at the bottom of that slide for a bit more detailed guidance on those steps. But you do want to keep those 4 main duties in mind as we go through today's session. Now, as well as those foundation of the duties there are a few ongoing duties that you'll need to stay on top of when it comes to remaining compliant. So you do want to assess your employees regularly. So you do want to do that every time you run a payroll. So you'll need to look at age and wage every single time you run a payroll. And that just helps you identify any changes that might mean now that an employee now qualifies for auto enrolment. So whether that be a pay increase or maybe a birthday. Now, you can do that manually by checking each employee's record and enter payments. But if you are using the Sage 50 payroll pensions module, you can run a pension assessment, which will do that work automatically for you. And that's what we'll be looking at in more detail today. You'll continue to make regular contributions to your pension scheme. So that does include checking that you're meeting the minimum contribution levels as well, which that's an 8% total for both employer and employee contributions and 3% from the employer. You'll also need to manage any requests from your employees to join or leave the pension scheme. So really important to keep accurate records of those requests and any changes to their pension status as well. And then every 3 years, you are required to carry out re-enrolment duties. So what that means is you re-enroll any eligible employees who have previously opted out of the pension scheme. Now, that is a legal requirement unless they have opted out in the last year. But if you are wanting to know more about that, then we do have our cyclical re-enrollment webinar coming up tomorrow as well. So make sure to get registered if you are wanting a bit more detail around that. So before I actually dive into the pension assessment itself, I want to spend a moment talking about worker types because these are going to come up a lot during today's session. So when your employees are assessed, they'll be assigned to one of three categories. So that's either entitled, eligible, or non-eligible. If we break those down a little bit, so entitled workers, they're going to be between the ages of 16 and 74. They'll be working in the UK, but they'll be earning below £6,240. Now, these employees do have the right to join the pension scheme, but they won't be automatically enrolled. And if they are entitled, you as an employer do not have an obligation to also contribute. So that is something that would be the employer's decision. Next up, we have our eligible workers. So they're going to be age 22 to state pension age, again working in the UK and earning above £10,000. So these are the employees who must be automatically enrolled into your pension scheme. So if someone fits that category, they do have to be enrolled. Of course, they can opt out if they choose. We'll come to that a little bit later on, but they must be auto-enrolled into your pension scheme. And then we have our non-eligible workers. So a couple different scenarios with this one. They're going to either be aged between 16 and 21 or state pension age to 74. They'll earn above the £10,000, or they might be aged between 16 and 74 and be earning between that 6,240 and £10,000. So a couple of different scenarios with that one, but these employees have the right to opt into the scheme if they choose. And that does mean that you as an employer would have to contribute also if they did choose to opt in. So a little bit different from the entitled workers, that one. So normally you would have to assess employees manually to figure out these different worker types and then assign the pension scheme where needed in the record. But that is where the pension assessment tool comes in handy. So it automates that entire process for you and it makes it much easier. And I will show you how that works in the demo shortly. So moving on to the pension assessment, which is part of the pensions module. As I said earlier, that is designed to make your pension duties a lot quicker and easier to handle. Now, that is available as an additional subscription within Payroll, but the pension module does include a few different things. So I just want to run through that now. So it includes your pension assessment, of course. It includes tools for sending your pension letters, so sending pension correspondence, which we'll look at a little bit later on in the webinar. And you have options to send your pension data. So that might be either via a manual report, so like an export report, or directly through to some providers. But we do have our Send Pension Data webinar to learn more about that. And it does have a load of other features as well, just to help you stay compliant. So what does the pension assessment actually do? It'll automatically assess your employees based on their age and their earnings. It'll then assign the correct worker category, so whether that be entitled, eligible, or non-eligible. And if an employee is eligible for automatic enrolment, it will then automatically assign the pension scheme into their record for you. Now, it will let you filter and view changes from one pay period to the next. So really, really handy for tracking any changes. And it will also calculate contributions for both the employee and employer. And last but definitely not least, it'll help you manage those opt-in, opt-out and postponement requests as well. So in a nutshell, really, the pensions module is there to take a lot of the manual work away and save you a load of time, especially if you do have a large number of employees to assess each period. So really good tool for staying compliant and efficient as well. Now, before I jump in and show you the pension assessment itself, here's a quick tip just to check whether you actually already have the pensions module or not. So simply click on pension assessment in your payroll software that's located in your payroll tasks down the left-hand side, and one of two things will happen. If you're prompted to take a backup at that point, that's a good sign. It means that your license includes the pensions module, therefore the pension assessment as well. But if you see a message like the one on the right asking you to subscribe, then your license doesn't currently include it. And you would need to subscribe just to get access to that feature. So nice and quick, easy way to start to check that before you get started. Now, before I jump into the live demo, I want to talk about when you should run the pension assessment during your pay run. Timing is really key with this one. So the best time to run it is after you've entered all of your employee payments, but before you generate your pre-update reports. Might be wondering why timing is so crucial with this one. Just want to give you a bit of context around that. So at this point of your process, all of your wages are entered. So what that means is that's going to allow the assessment to then calculate your contributions accurately. It also means that any changes that are triggered by the assessment, so like enrolling employees or dating contributions, can then be applied before you run your reports and you update your records as well. Now, a couple different places that you can find the pension assessment option. You can access it from your payroll tasks down the left-hand side, or if you are using the process map, you'll see it has its own dedicated step on there as well. So whichever method you prefer, it is really easy to locate. So now that we know when to run the assessment, let's move on to how to run it. So good news is there's really not a lot that you need to do. It is simply just clicking on the pension assessment option. But as I said, it is really important to make sure you've done things in the right order to allow the assessment to work accurately. So here's the key steps to check. First is making sure your processing date is correct. So this should be the date of your next pay run. So the date that you want to assess employees for. Next, and we've touched on this already, is entering all of the payments for your employees before running that assessment. That is going to ensure that payroll is using the correct wages and dates, which of course can affect worker type and eligibility. So once those first two steps are done, you then want to click on the pension assessment option itself. So like I said, if your subscription includes the module, that's when you'll be prompted to take a backup. And we do always say it, but this is, of course, really important. So the assessment is going to make changes to your employee records based on eligibility and the information that you've entered. So having a backup means that you can always restore if you do need to. So just a bit of a safety net for you and your data. And then finally, you will view the pension assessment results. So the assessment will run, you'll see the results on one page, and it makes it really easy to review worker categories, contributions, and any changes that you come across. So that is the sequence that you really want to be following when you're running the assessment. But at this point, I do want to dive straight into the demo and see how this all works in practice. So let's just lose the slides there. So I'm logged into my company, and the first thing I'm going to do is double check my processing date. So I've already processed May. My next pay run, if I just check, is the 30th of June. So that's looking spot on for me. So step 2 is entering payments for employees. Now, I have skipped ahead and already done this just for the sake of time. And most of my employees do earn the same amount each month. However, I do have a new starter this month, and that's employee 14. Now, I have added another employee, employee 15, but they don't actually start until July anyways. So I am going to leave those deselected for now. So let's get everyone else highlighted. So I've checked my processing date. I have entered my payments. Step 3 from my payroll tasks is simply running my pension assessment. You can see there it prompts me to take a backup. And this is really important, is the assessment will make changes to employee records. So having a backup just means that you can restore it later if needed, if there is any corrections that you need to make. So I'm just going to take this first one. Browse to my backups folder and just save in there. And that's my backup all done. So if anything does go wrong, fingers crossed it doesn't, but at least I have that peace of mind and safety net. And you can see there the assessment is loaded up and we have landed on our pension assessment page. And here's what we can see. So on the left-hand column, you can see our selected tick boxes. You can use those to select or deselect the employees, and it will give you the total for those selected employees. Next, we'll show your flag column. Now, the flags they're not anything to worry about. That does throw people off sometimes. But what the flag means is that's all of the changes for this pay period. So you can see I've got a couple of flags here. So employee 7 has a flag. And funny enough, they changed to full-time from part-time this month. So you can see there, their worker category has changed. They've been auto-enrolled this period, and that is because of a pay spike as well. So that all makes sense to me. And employee 14 has a flag as well. We'll hover over that. We can see that's as they're a new starter, and they've been assessed as eligible, and they have been automatically enrolled because of that. Moving across, we've got some employee details. So we have the employee names on there, their numbers, the NI number. And then we have our worker type and status here as well. So most of my employees, as you can see, are eligible, but there are a few exceptions. So if we go down to employee 6, we hover over the little spyglass, we can see that they are non-eligible. So they are earning enough, but they are 73, so they're over state pension age. So that means they fall into the non-eligible job category. And you can see next steps, they can of course request to opt in if they do wish so. Now, employee 11 is also non-eligible. You can see a bit of a similar situation with the age. So they are earning enough, but they are only 21. So they're not yet in that eligible age bracket. And when they turn 22, that's when they'll be reassessed and enrolled automatically, providing that the wage is still enough. And you can see again on those next steps, we can see it's letting us know they can, of course, request to opt in if they want to. Now, next up, we have a couple of entitled workers. So employee 8 and 9, if we hover over that, So they are the right age, but they only earn around £350 a month. So the casual workers, these ones, so they actually fall into the entitled category. So wage just isn't quite enough there. So of course, I did touch on this earlier, they can request to join the scheme, but the employer doesn't have to contribute in that circumstance. If a non-eligible employee joined or opted in, then the employer would have to contribute. So that's the two differences between those two worker types there. So a couple of different options that I want to draw attention to on this screen. So we've got our pension scheme. If you are running multiple schemes, I am just running the one in my company, but this will tell you the scheme name as it is set up in your company pension schemes. We've then got our contributions, so we've got employee and employer and amounts as well. There's also a refund column, so if an employee opts out and is due a refund, then you'll see that amount here. And then finally, on that far right column, you'll see the totals for each employee. And then we've got a total at the bottom there. Now, a couple of useful tools also available on this screen. We've got our top left options here. So we have our opt-in, our opt-out, and leave and postpone buttons. So you can process any requests directly from these options, but we will come back to that a little bit later on in the webinar. We have our top right filters as well. So if you wanted to search for a particular employee, so say you can see there, you've maybe got a large payroll, and you can filter by changes and a whole load of other options and job holder types as well. We've got a couple of selection tools here. So we have a clear and a swap. And we have some export options just in the bottom right there as well. So of course, one of your ongoing duties is to keep records of who joins or leaves the scheme. From here, you can email, print, export this as a CSV file, this report here. So even if there aren't any major changes, is a bit of best practice, just saving a copy each period, just so you have a clear record of what has happened and when. So as you can see, the pension assessment screen gives you everything in one place. So that's worker types, contributions, changes, and quick access to any actions. So you can see it really is removing a lot of the manual aspect of assessing employees individually or assigning those schemes by hand. So before we move on, I just want to go through a little bit of a recap. So first, we've seen our flag icons. And remember, you can hover over them to identify any changes for the employee that period. So a worker category update, or if they've been auto-enrolled. We have our top right filters and search. So you can filter to show only employees with changes, or you can search for name or an I number. Got a worker category and status, so that's going to show each employee's category and current status. But of course, similar to the flags, you can hover over the magnifying glass for more details. We then have our contribution, our contribution details as well over on the right hand side. And our action buttons as well in the top left. So that's where you would process any opt-ins, opt-outs, and postponements as well that you get requested from your employees. So a bit of a recap of what we've seen in the pension assessment screen there. So speaking of those options in the top left, that does bring us on nicely to the next section. And that is all going to be around postponement, opting in and opting out as well. So before we jump back into the demo and pick up from where we left off, I do want to go through a little bit of an overview of what these are. So postponement. Now, you can postpone an employee's automatic enrolment by up to 3 months maximum. But it is only in some situations, so either from your duty start date as an employer, from a new starter's first day of employment, or from the day that the employee becomes eligible. So if maybe they've had a birthday, they've changed from 21 to 22, they're now eligible, then they can be postponed at that point. So postponement is commonly used for temporary staff, so maybe summer, Christmas workers, or if an employee's on a probationary period as well, as quite a common scenario. But very straightforward to apply in the pension assessment, and we'll look at that closely in a moment. Next up, we have opt-in and join requests. So remember, employees who are non-eligible or entitled can request to join the pension scheme. So non-eligible employees can opt in. If they do, the employer must contribute. Now, entitled employees can join, but in this case, the employer can choose whether to contribute if they want to or not. So both types of employees, doesn't matter which worker type they fall into, they do need to make the request in writing. So they would request that, and then you would process that within the pension assessment. And that follows on nicely to opting out. So opting out applies to those employees who are automatically enrolled, but they actually decide to leave the pension scheme. Now, typically, they have a 1-month opt-out period after enrolment. Now, requests must go through the pension provider, who will then notify you, the employer. You will then go and process the opt-out and payroll. Now, if an employee leaves after that 1-month window, they can still leave, but it will show as cessation in the assessment as instead, and it will not automatically process that refund. So just a bit of a heads up there if they are outside of that 1-month window. Speaking of refunds, again, if they opt out within that 1-month period, then you must refund that full contribution, which the pension assessment can do automatically. Now, if they leave after the opt-out period, sometimes up to the provider's discretion, they are still happy to refund it, then you would just have to process it through enter payments instead. The pension assessment will only allow you to automate that within that 1-month opt-out window. But I have popped a link on the bottom of the slides there, just some more detailed steps for both of those situations on refunds, on how to process them manually if it is needed as well. So with all of that said, let's jump back to the demo and pick up where we left off. So I'm still in my pension assessment for June, and just as a bit of a reminder, only employees flagged for changes this period was employee 7 and 14. Now, as part of my employer duties, I would need to write to employee 7 and 14 to let them know they've been auto-enrolled, but we'll look at that a bit later on. So I've run my assessment for June. Now, if we just pretend that I've exported and saved that record just for the essence of time, I'm just going to skip ahead and go straight to my update records and get those figures locked in for June. So I'm going to skip ahead to July. We'll pretend that the FPS is also being sent. And I just want to take a look at some of these employees. So process date is set. First part of my checklist all done, 31st of July. And remember, that is important because your pension assessment actually uses your processing date. So definitely an important first step. Now, next up, I'm going to jump in enter payments. Now, remember, I do have a new employee starting in July, so I need to make sure they're included. Now, most of my employees, like I mentioned earlier, do earn the same, but there are a couple of changes I need to action this time round. So, employee 8 has been awarded a pay rise, so their contract has actually changed. Their monthly pay is now going to go up to £825. So I'm just going to amend that for employee 8. And then we have our new starter. So just going to do a quick check of their salary. It's all looking good to me. And that's my enter payment step all done and dusted. Next up, I'm going to jump in and run my pension assessment. See, I'm being prompted to take a backup, which is always a good sign. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop a clear name on there. So I'm going to say July. Now my backup's done, my assessment window will load. I can see a few flag icons on here, and remember these indicate a change this pay period. So employee 8, their worker category has changed, and remember they were getting a pay rise, so they've went from entitled to non-eligible. So you can see their category has changed, and they can request to opt in rather than join. Employee 11, remember they were 21, they've actually turned 22 this pay period, so their category has changed from non-eligible to eligible. And because they're now eligible, they are getting auto-enrolled into the pension scheme. And then employee 15, our new starter, they have immediately been assessed as eligible. And of course, because of that, they are getting automatically enrolled. So all of that makes sense to me. You know, everything is making sense there with the status changes, but there are actually a few changes that I need to process this pay run. So first up, my new starter, employee 15, they're actually a temporary staff member, so they're only going to be here for 3 months. Now, I want to postpone their auto enrolment. So I'm going to select employee 15 from the list. And I'm going to go up to my top left options and select postpone. Now, remember, you can postpone up to 3 months from their start date. And you'll notice if I skip ahead, the calendar actually grays itself out after that. So, bit of a top tip, you select the calendar rather than choosing a date, then that will always show you the latest date you can postpone. So I'm going to select that date, press postpone. We can see that has been successfully applied. Now I am expecting them to only be here for 3 months, but if they are still in the business, then they will be reassessed when that date arrives. And if they are still employed and eligible, they'll then be put back into the scheme and they'll be enrolled into the scheme at that point. So we can see that the status is now postponed and their contributions are 0. So that's all looking good for me. Now, employee 8, remember they've also got a change. They changed to non-eligible, and they've actually written in asking to opt into the pension scheme. So remember, as they're non-eligible, now that they're opting in, I, as the employer, will need to contribute. So again, I'm going to tick them, select them, go to opt in, join just up at the top, enter the date that I have received the request, 11th of July, and the pension scheme they're going to be opted into as well. Now you can attach a file if you've maybe got a copy of the letter. really good way to keep that documented. I'm just going to leave that for now, and I'm going to go ahead and opt employee 8 into the scheme. You can see that change has been successfully applied. And if I hover over the spyglass, the change is reflected in the assessment. So we can see their status is now changed to opt-in, and it shows the enrolment date, which is set to the next relevant pay period, which is the 6th of August. So they've opted in this pay period, their contributions will kick in next time round. That's employee 8 all sorted. And I do have one more request to process, and that is employee 14. Now remember, they were auto-enrolled last month as a new starter. However, since then, they have actually contacted my pension provider and requested to opt out of the scheme. I've received that notice from my provider, so I now need to process that in payroll. But again, it is very similar to the opt-in request. So I'm going to select employee 14, go into opt out and leave. I'm going to enter the date that I've received the request. That is 7th of July on the letter. Now, if they've used in an extension period, you can tick that box. Now, that allows up to 6 weeks for the employee to correct any issues with their opt-out form, if there are any, of course. Now, depending on when they've opted out, remember you've got that 1 month window, you might also see the option to refund the first month's contribution. You can see I've got that, and if I tick that box, we have that first month contribution that will be refunded to the employee, as they have opted out within that 1 month window. See, the refund amount is in here. And if I go ahead and opt out, see, we can see the status change there and how much is due in refunds just on the right hand side also. But remember, if they have opted out outside of that 1 month window and they are still due a refund, you can also process that through enter payments instead. And this will likely say cessation rather than opt out if it is outside of that 1 month. So that is all of my changes, all processed in my pension assessment. Do just want to jump back to the slides for a bit of a recap. So this pay period, remember, was skipped forward to July. I've postponed one employee, employee 15. I've opted in, employee 8, and processed an opt-out for employee 14. So at that point, I'd save my record of the pension assessment and continue with my payroll as normal. Now that does bring us on to the last bit of the webinar, which is another feature of the pensions module, send and pension correspondence. Now, I did touch on this earlier, but remember, under automatic enrolment, one of your duties is to communicate to your employees to keep them informed of their status. So send pension correspondence, that option will allow you to print or email those pension letters. You can generate general notices, enrolment letters, postponement letters, and re-enrolment letters as well. And you can keep a historical record of all letters sent. Now, just a bit of a heads up, if you do want employees to receive these letters via email, you do want to make sure that they've got their email address entered in that analysis tab of their record and that they're all set up to receive documents via email. So definitely worth checking before you jump into that option, just in case that hasn't got the right setup in place. Now, this is a post-update task, so a bit different from the assessment. You'll do this after that you've updated records. But what we'll do is let's jump back into the demo and take a look at send pension correspondence in a little bit more detail. So this is a post-update task, so I'm going to close out of my pension assessment and just go ahead and update my records for July. And now I have that information locked in. We can see send pension correspondence is the very last option in my payroll tasks. So I'm just going to jump into there now. And you can see I have a lot of different information there. So I've got letters to be sent. It's flagging up 10. It'll give us the employee name, the NI number, and the name of the letter as well. Now, we do have different types of letters in here. So we've got general notices. So that'll be for all employees. They get sent out at the company's duty start date. We have job holder letters. So those are for employees automatically enrolled. And we have postponement letters as well. So we can see we've got a postponement letter in there for employee 15, which we actioned a little bit earlier. Now I've got 10 letters waiting to be sent. And a bit similar to the pension assessment screen, you can filter and search if you do have a larger payroll and maybe you need to find a specific employee or letter type. But each letter does have a clickable link as well. So you can preview the letter before actually sending it. You can see the information on there. So if you do need a review, you can always click on the links and review each letter for your employees. Now, I'm going to mark these letters as sent because my provider actually deals with all of the correspondence. However, I would still recommend coming in here and keeping on top of this, even if your provider does send the correspondence out, just because it is a nice historical record for you as an employer of what was sent and when. So I'm going to select all my employees. See, I do actually have the option to select that it was sent by the provider. You see they sent out today. Of course, if you need to change this date, it will default to your processing date, but to today's date. But if you do need to change it, then you can do so in bulk just at the bottom section there. And then I can show them as sent. And that is my send pension correspondence. Now you can always view your historical correspondence by employees or by date if you do want a bit of a paper trail of what has been sent. So you can see I now, although the provider is dealing with that correspondence, I now have a historical paper trail of what letters were due to my employees and when. So again, still a handy tool, even if the provider handles that for you. If they don't, then this is going to be even better on getting that information sent out. So that's a quick overview of send pension correspondence. You just want to quickly recap that before we go ahead and wrap up. So remember, first up, you can preview your letters by clicking on the link and you can check their due dates. You can use the filter and search options to find any specific letter types or employees just similar to your pension assessment. We've got our select options to using your tick boxes. So you can use swap and clear, or you can select in bulk by using the tick box at the top left. You can choose your sent on date in the date column or change that in bulk by selecting it at the bottom. And then you can show the letters as sent or send them from there by printing or emailing, depending on what your preference is and, of course, what you already have set up in the employee record. And then once that's done, you can view historical correspondence by date or by employee as well. So you've always got that paper trail going on in the background. But with that said, that does bring us to the end of the pension assessment webinar today. So we've looked at running our pension assessment. We've looked at handling changes like postponements, opt-ins and opt-outs. And then we've looked at sending pension correspondence at the end as well. Now, before I go ahead and finish up, I do want to wrap things up by looking at some further support. Of course, today is part of our Pensions Discovery 2026 series. So remember, you need to attend at least 5 different live webinars plus the quiz to earn your digital badge. So if you've attended today, well done, you've got at least one ticked off the list already. But yes, we've got a couple of dates and times to choose from, so please do get signed up and come along if you can. Now, bit of a tip with this one, please do register with the same email address for all sessions. It's what we use to track the badge, so really important just to make sure we get your badge to you. We have our Sage Help Centre. That is a really great resource. So we have our on-demand webinars, our support guides, and access to our tech support team if you do need to get in touch. And last but not least, just to let you know, we do now offer some personalised one-to-one training as well. So if you do want a dedicated remote session with one of our experts, then simply scan the QR code and complete the form. Dead quick to complete, and someone will call you within 48 hours to chat with you and make some recommendations. So I've had some great feedback on these sessions. If you do think it would suit your needs and your business, then get that QR code scanned and the form filled out. But of course, it will be on the handout as well if you do want to do that a little bit later. Hello again, everyone. I really hope you've all enjoyed today's session. I think we've got all those questions answered, so we'll go ahead and close the session down in the next minute or so. As you exit, you will see a short survey. If you please take a moment to fill that out, we do love reading all of your feedback. Now, you will also receive a follow-up email later today. It'll have a link to today's webinar recording on there and information on how to register for any future sessions as well. But thanks again from me, Duncan and Alice for joining us today. Hopefully we will see you again soon, but it is goodbye for now.